Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial organizer, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And today, Roberta, we're going to deal with what homeowners need to know about lead, about getting the lead out. And we have a guest. We have a guest today who's going to talk about that.
Yes, we are really very fortunate to have with us Marc Beaudette, who's a licensed lead
paint
inspector, and he's going to tell you why it's important even today. Marc, welcome here. This is a subject I'm really passionate about, but tell us a little bit about yourself, how you happen to get into it, what do you do, how did they find out about you, and on and on.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. The way I got started was initially, we actually had a family business in Brockton for 25 years. It was a rental business. And when that closed, I had obviously devoted most of my career life to, you know, a small store. So I had to reinvent myself. And I'd always been interested in rehabs. I've got some rental property, and I was always interested in home improvement, everything related to homes. And I decided that I was going to try to be a home inspector, not a lead inspector, but a home inspector. And while I was in the middle of that course, we had a speaker who was a lead paint inspector, and it caught my attention. And I just randomly decided at that point that I wanted to be a lead paint inspector, and it's taken off. It's been about 10 years now.
And why did it catch your attention?
It caught my, well, I'll tell you why it really caught my attention. Home inspectors a home inspector's job is really not very glamorous. They can find themselves in a rat-infested crawl space. They can find themselves on roofs. They can find themselves. It's just, it's a very, very hands-on type career. And when this guy spoke, he used an X-ray gun, and they don't have to go in crawl space. They only have to go in places that are habitated rooms.
Well, the bank, it's more like home inspections required by banks. Aren't they? Before you buy a house, you want to make sure the roof is good.
Usually the banks, they don't require it, but some do, some don't. But it's usually left as an option in the documents, the purchase and sales documents, that you have a certain amount of time, usually 10 days.
Yeah. Well, I know lead paint, the lead paint inspection is for children, and we'll get into that, to protect the children.
Well, that's correct. The lead law, in its simplest form, reads any...
That's rain.
That's thunder, too.
That's thunder.
Any occupied dwelling or residence in Massachusetts that was built before 1978, not inclusive of 78, but before 1978, in which a child under 6 is going to reside, has to be de-leaded or made lead safe.
Yeah, I know that that's true, too, in other parts of the country. I mean, it wouldn't be true in new houses because they don't use... When did they stop using lead paint?
In 1978, they outlawed the use of lead paint in residences. Now, they still use it in some areas, but they use it for things like city fire hydrants, painting streets. Yeah, commercial, marine uses. They use it a lot on boats.
Yeah.
But for residences, it was outlawed in 1978.
Do most states have the same type of law?
No. There is a general law that the federal government has. It's put out by the EPA, and it's generally called, in my line of work, it's called the federal standard.
Well, EPA,
Environmental Protection Agency, yep. And they have a standard out that states, it spells out exactly what needs to be done in cases of lead. Now, each individual state is also allowed to make its own provisions, and the state of Massachusetts is probably one of, if not the most stringent, strict in the country of all the states.
You think it's because we got all these cities? Usually if there's cities, that's where the houses were built before 1978.
Cities, cities are generally older, and especially the Northeast. is the oldest part of this country. I mean, the Puritans landed here, so the oldest houses in the country are in the Northeast. So we have very strict standards here in Massachusetts, and over the years, the mass lead law has been very, very successful in bringing the poisoning rates down.
Now, what about someone who lives in a dwelling already? If they have children, did you say 6 or under? Age
Under 6.
Do they have to still have this done, or is it only if they're moving into a place that they have to, that the house has to be de-leaded?
Okay, well, I said that in its simplest form, it says that children in residences where children under 6 reside have to be either made lead safe or de-leaded. They actually have to be, compliant, lead compliant in Massachusetts. That can be interpreted by different, like it can be interpreted one way by a family residence, a mom and pop who have little kids in their house and they never thought about it. And it comes up a lot because how many people have bought a house and the first thing they want to do is make it their own? They spend time doing renovations and they spend time, let's put a baby's room in, and when the babies come along. And
yeah, I know we're hopping around and we didn't even finish finding out what you got into it. But why is it so important? This is why they passed it, I think. Why is it so important for children 6 and under? Why not children 12 and up? Why not adults? Why children 6 and under?
Children under 6, not 6, including 6, under 6.
Oh, under
so
6.
1 through 5, yeah. That's when their brains are in their their organs and their entire metabolism is forming the first 5 years of your life, and especially the brain. When lead gets into the system, it lodges in the bones and it doesn't go away, or it doesn't go away easily. They have some ways of treating it, but
That's it. That's the whole thing.
And it has a very permanent effect on developmental issues in kids.
Like what? Can you give us any examples?
Well, it could affect their learning ability through the rest of their life, depending on this, the extent to which they're exposed. It can cause liver problems. It can cause kidney problems.
Wow.
It can cause bone problems.
And this is if they ingest the lead?
If they ingest it. Now, by ingesting, I mean usually the vast majority of kids get poisoned by lead dust from old windows.
Oh.
That
Yeah.
grind
See,
open and close.
People think it's because they chewed on the windowsill or they eat it, but it's the dust in the air. I took that course. I took that course all about lead paint.
Yeah.
And it was right around the time when there was a whole thing all over the country about China, lead cars or something, or paint on lead cars.
It was actually toys that there was a big issue.
Yeah, toys. And I remember meeting you then, and you said they shouldn't worry about the lead toys. Let them worry about the dust that's in the house. Talk about the dust. What you mean
Dust
by
is the major contributor to, because it's insidious. You can't really see it. A regular vacuum cleaner doesn't clean it. You really need a HEPA vac to clean it. So, say for instance you have an old window and it's got lead paint on the parts that slide and all the movable parts. It's old, obviously. Every time you open and close that window, it grinds and creates dust that falls into the window well. Well, come summertime, everybody opens up all their windows, and all that stuff blows in on the furniture, the rugs, and we're talking about kids that are from 1 to 5. So 1 to 3, they're crawling around on the floor. It's getting on their hands, it's getting on their toys. They put their hands in their mouths.
Yeah.
So they can either ingest it, orally, or they can ingest it just by breathing it.
Even the breathing?
Even breathing, sure.
Wow.
Yep. And
What's
because
HEP vac?
HEPA vac, yeah, it's high efficiency particulate something.
Isn't that what they sell today?
Yeah, oh yeah, you can get
I
them in
mean,
upright vacuum cleaners.
No, I mean, isn't that what they all are today?
No.
Oh, no?
Nope.
Oh.
Nope. It's got to say HEPA on it, and some of the HEPA ones, they're pushing it by calling it HEPA. It's really not. It's got to be a good quality HEPA vacuum. Usually the canister vacs are the best ones.
So let's say that there is a family who's affected. They live in a property, an older property, and the house does have lead paint. What do they do? What are the steps they have to follow?
Okay, well, hopefully they didn't find out they had lead paint because the child was, found to have high blood levels. Let me just say that in Massachusetts, They have to automatically test kids at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then in some areas that are considered high-risk areas, also 4 years old.
But they test the children?
They test the children, usually with a finger prick test.
Do
In
the
daycares, schools, doctors' offices.
if someone lives or runs a business in an older house and they don't know, how do they find out?
If regarding a business,
Dwelling, or if it's someone who lives in a house, let's say,
Yeah, or
and they
even a
may not
doctor's
know,
office.
how would they know if they don't have lead paint, or they do? How would they be able to tell? They
well,
have to-
don't forget, the lead law only applies to residences.
Okay,
Oh.
so
It doesn't apply to commercial buildings.
So let's say it's a residence that was built way back in the 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a family living there now. They don't know if there's lead. How do they find out?
They don't know if there's lead. They would have to call a lead paint inspector,
And that's where you come in?
and that's where I would come in.
Now,
So
now
I-
where do they get this list of lead paint inspectors?
There is there's a state website, which they should really, any investor, any home buyer, this should be one of the things that they do as a normal course of action whenever you're investing or buying property, for yourself or for investment or whatever. You should always check the state website to see if that home or that property shows up on their state database for lead home inspections. All the inspectors, and there's about 80 of us in Massachusetts, we have to, when we do an inspection, we have to submit that to the state. All that information gets entered into a central database.
How do they check if the inspector was supposed to put it on that list, but he doesn't? What do they do then?
What does who do? The owner?
Yeah, what does the owner do then? Or what do the people do? They
Well-
bought a house, they think it's lead-free, they were told that, but they can't find any proof.
Never believe that a home is lead-free by word of mouth. Unfortunately, that word lead-free gets thrown around a lot. And unless you have a legitimate piece of paper that is a state-registered document made out by a licensed lead paint inspector that says it's either been deleted or it's passed its initial inspection, then don't go by anything. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially people who are not familiar, a lot of foreign people, they come in and they believe what these people tell them. They believe, what these people supposedly in prominent positions tell them when they say that it's deleaded, and you can't do that. You can never assume.
So what happens now, you get into an inspector comes in. How do you de-lead? Well, first, how do you test, and then how do you de-lead?
Let me first, you guys ask a lot of questions. We're jumping
Well,
around all over the place.
it's a fascinating subject. Go ahead in your order.
I'm trying to, okay, just to stay on track with the initial question. In order to check the database on the state, you would go to state.mass.us/CLPPP. Okay, that's the state website. And on that website, you can get information on where to find an inspector, how to de-lead, what kind of de-leading you can do, how to get authorized like you did for doing de-leading, and if your property is actually listed on the state database to see if it shows up past activity. Now, if it does show up, it doesn't mean it's a good thing or a bad thing. It just lists it, and it says it was initially inspected maybe and hazards were found, or it was initially inspected and then it was de-leaded, and then it came up as it was issued by the inspector a letter of compliance. So it shows you all the history on each property. And that gives
now
you,
you can answer her question.
and that gives you a very good idea. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what was
No,
your
that's
question?
okay.
No, I just want to know, when you first get called in, how do you
How do
test
you-
it, and then how do you actually do the de-leading?
Okay,
how do you do it?
I don't do the de-leading. I do the inspections. I could do de-leading. They don't recommend that inspectors get de-leaded, but by any event, even if they were a de-leader, they couldn't de-lead their
yeah,
own
sure.
properties that they inspect.
Oh,
So,
that's a good
okay,
point.
but aside, there are very few inspectors that are also de-leaders. But when I go in, the first thing I do is, before I even go to the property, I check the database. We're required to. We're required to check the database and see what the history is. If we have any question about the history, if it's not straightforward, then we have to contact CLEP. So I keep saying this thing, CLEP. That is the Child Lead Poisoning Prevention Program. That's the CLPPP.
We didn't even have to ask that. You knew
No,
you were
you-
going to ask that, huh?
Yeah.
What's CLPP?
CL3Ps.
Oh, 3Ps.
3Ps.
Oh, yeah.
So the first thing we do is we check the database at CLEP. If we have any questions, we call them, and they give us an instant, usually within a day or two, instant response. So we do this a couple of days ahead of time. So there was some prep work in addition to just showing up. Once we get once we're comfortable with the history that we have on the property, then we go to the property, and we have a specific routine that we rotate to a house and check individual painted surfaces. Now we check all the painted surfaces on the inside, on the outside of the house, on a garage if there's a garage, on a shed if there's sheds, or if there's 5 sheds, all 5 sheds. All that is part of the inspection.
Isn't it up to like 5 feet or 4 feet? Or do
Well,
you
the
go
5 foot,
higher?
4 foot thing refers to the actual process of deletting.
Oh,
So, yeah, it's 5 feet now. It used to be 4 feet, but now it's 5 feet in the process when you're doing the process of deletting. But there are many types of deletting, and although that lead law, the initial description I gave you seems kind of simple, there's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of details involved in the actual deletting, who can deled, what types of components do you have to deled, and what are the different ways of deletting different types of components.
that's where the moderate risk license, like I think they're saying, well, how did I get a license? Do you want to tell them even though Massachusetts is a hard state, a lot of states are doing that.
Okay, so in Massachusetts, there's 3 levels of deletting. There's low risk deletting. That's the easiest one. And obviously it's the one with that causes the least contamination when you're doing the work. The low risk deletting can be things like covering woodwork with another thin piece of wood to below 5 feet, so that a child can't access it by mouth. Even though they've done studies and kids don't chew on woodwork, but this is part of the state lead law. Another form of low-risk deletting would be encapsulation paint. It's a paint that you can buy at almost any box store or any paint store. And you can use it on certain interior surfaces, almost just like a paint. And that is guaranteed. It's almost like a rubbery type.
What does encapsulating mean?
Encapsulation is actually,
ambiguous.
encapsulation has many different words, and that's another word that's kind of misused. But in the lead world, encapsulation is a liquid coating. Okay, and in the regular world, encapsulation can be almost any way of wrapping something. But in the lead world, encapsulation always refers to the lead paint coating. So you can do that. That's a low risk procedure. It's very low cost, and it's usually the easiest way to de-lead on the interior of a property. But again, you have to be authorized to do low risk deletting.
Okay.
And that's one of the 2 ways that homeowners can do their own deletting, is with low risk and moderate risk. So
Yeah, the state wants the homeowner to do it.
Well, it's a good option.
It encourages them so
Yeah.
that they don't get, because I remember years ago with the lead paint de-letters, the license de-letters, it was like they were the only ones around and you had to pay them, and they were really, you don't hear that much. So
well, it can be expensive, and there are a lot of de-letters out there, and they are required in a lot of instances. But they, around the 90s, they gave homeowners this option that, well, we can't scare you away from fixing your own house, and we can't scare you away from making it safe. So we should give you some option on being able to do some of the low and moderate risk work yourself. The stuff that, as long as you, get authorized like you did, you took an 8-hour class, right?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you hire somebody. I think we changed windows.
Yeah, and you can
covered up a few.
Yeah, and you
things.
can hire somebody to do the high risk work. But as long as you get authorized, you can do lower and moderate risk work. So
Well, what's the high risk? Tell people what high risk is.
high risk work would be considered anything where you create a high amount of lead dust in the process of deletting. Things like demolition, breaking down walls, things like sanding of lead paint, scraping of lead paint. That kind of stuff can only be done by a deleter.
What happens when, like, I saw this house being demolished? Do they have to take any particular, safety
Precautions,
precautions that it doesn't go flying?
That's not really my area of expertise, but I know they do limit. I mean, a lot of times you'll see them misting water over a construction site, which lowers the dust hazard. Some towns require it, some towns don't. It's more of a local Board of Health issue, depending on the town.
Oh.
But
that's
it doesn't
interesting.
come under the heading of leading, it comes under the heading of demolition. So,
Do they still make lead paint today?
they do.
And what's the advantage of the lead paint? Obviously, there's disadvantages, but why would somebody want to use lead paint?
Well, anybody who's ever painted their house with lead paint will tell you it lasts a long time. It lasts a long time. And that's why a lot of the poisonings didn't happen until 20, 30 yees after
is
this.
that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
So a
got
lot
about
of people tell me, they say,
20 more
well,
pages of questions for you.
oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
A lot of the people say, well, I grew up in a house with lead paint. It never affected me, but it didn't affect you because it wasn't deteriorating at the time when you were growing up there.
It's the deterioration.
It's your kids that are getting affected by
It's the
it.
deterioration.
It's the deterioration, and it
Oh.
does deteriorate after a
No
while.
kidding.
And one of the obvious, you look at a house and you can see all the alligatoring and the peeling and the
Oh, yeah, and the
curling of
scraping.
the paint.
When they
Yeah.
do scraping and sanding.
Yep.
They might be scraping and sanding lead paint, or even it might be under it.
Usually, when we do inspections, it's usually under 5 layers of latex paint.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
but it still is a hazard.
How do you discover the lead? With
I
some sort of
have
tools?
an actual. It looks like a laser gun, but it's actually an X-ray gun.
Yeah.
And you place it against the surface, and you pull the trigger, and within a couple of seconds, it gives you a reading. And anything
Oh.
above 1.0, it stands for. I don't. It's per square centimeter. It's milligrams per square centimeter.
So it's an X-ray gun?
It's an X-ray gun.
Where else do they use a gun like that? Do they use
They use them. There's lots of X-ray guns in
just,
many fields.
just in construction?
No,
I
they
mean,
use them
like yours?
Well, yeah, they usually use them in the environmental industry to.
Mold sometimes uses
They
them.
use it. They have one for
Mold
mold,
detection.
but I don't
Really?
think they use X-ray for mold. I think they might use something else,
Oh.
infrared.
Some sort of a detector, though.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Tool.
regular handheld detector. A lot of them.
Camille has a question here. I'm looking at her questions here about a lead check kit.
Yeah, the
I
big
didn't know
box
you
stores,
could buy that.
if I guess it would be for the low and moderate risk where someone can go and buy a lead check kit.
Very familiar with that. They don't work.
They don't work.
They're not recognized by the state. I've seen many, many instances. Well, a lot of people call me and they say, "Geez, I went to Home Depot and bought a lead check kit, and
You must laugh.
I think it's positive." And I said, "Well, don't panic yet. You don't know if it's positive because those things are designed to operate under very specific conditions, and it's not. Nothing beats an X-ray. You know what I mean?"
Yeah.
Do you have that that gun with you? Because we can show it up on the screen while we're talking afterwards.
I have it outside.
Oh, okay. So you bring
Yeah.
it in, and they'll take a picture. We can
Sure.
take a picture or something.
Sure.
We'll figure it out. That's fascinating.
If it's a high risk case, what would you say a price range would be that a homeowner would have to expect to pay?
That's the second most often question that I get. It's hard to say, and simply because of this. It depends on the type of hazard, and it depends on where it's located in the property. In Massachusetts, if you have the entire outside of your house, the siding is covered with lead, then it's considered compliant as long as it's not loose or peeling on the exterior,
Oh,
unless it's a component of a door or a window below 5 feet.
yeah,
So.
okay.
So you don't necessarily have to scrape the whole house. You don't necessarily have to put siding on it.
Yeah.
If the entire house is peeling, then your two options are you hire a deleter, and you have them scrape and paint the entire house. That's that's an
put
option.
aluminum
Some people
siding
do
on
that. Some people do that.
or aluminum
Or you
siding
can put
or
well,
vinyl.
I don't think they use aluminum
No,
anymore,
I'm
but
dating myself. Vinyl siding.
vinyl siding. Yeah, yeah. You can use vinyl siding, and that now vinyl siding, by comparison, as opposed to a licensed deleter having to do the scraping and painting, somebody who takes a low-risk authorization test, like yourself,
Yeah.
could put vinyl covering on it because it's considered
Yeah,
covering.
we saved a lot of money back then. The only thing I can remember from the course, which was probably the most beneficial, is it's the little mines. People should worry about the houses more than the toys. That's the one thing that stuck out. We have one more question, then we're going to go to You've Got to Be Kidding.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've got this answer.
Is there any type of financial
Yeah.
assistance for people who can't afford to have the work done?
For a long, long time, there was financial assistance through the state and through the federal government. Obviously, with
Through the federal.
the latest budget problems, they pretty much limited that to like in Brockton, they have a program called Self-Help, and they will pay for the deletting of a property, assuming that a child came up with a high blood level or was poisoned, or you have an order to correct from City Hall, or...
And you know something? They go after the landlord, not necessarily the present landlord, but if you owned the house when the child lived there even 10 years before, and it starts, they sue you then too. They can sue you then too. So you're better off, not just for your own pocketbook.
You're the lawyer, you should know.
Yeah, I tell you, my brother went through that many years ago. Well, we're in our segment called "You've Got to Be Kidding." This is our "You've Got to Be Kidding" bag, and it's had a little wear on it, but it's a new bag. That's because I loaded everything in there. But for "You've Got to Be Kidding," which I pulled out, there was an article that somebody sent us. This is the Sun Sentinel. This is either this fellow here, and then from that we got all these.
So this fellow, Roberta is his last name, age 59, spent more than 4 decades in a coma.
Yeah, 40 years in a coma.
He spent more than 4 decades. Oh, it's a woman, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's a woman? I thought it was a man, too.
Gardens home, in her Miami Gardens home, she spent more than 4 decades in a coma.
Yeah, you got to be kidding.
It's amazing.
Yeah, she died Wednesday, or whatever this was,
Yeah,
Wednesday.
but anyway, from that, there are people who have been in comas. This is what I brought out, which different people have sent us, and we gathered them all up about, comas. One in and of itself is not, you've got to be kidding. But when you put them all together, you read one and I'll read one. You say you've got to be kidding. Oh, we have to wrap
This
up.
one?
We'll just do the first two.
A little girl in a coma woke up singing Mamma Mia.
And then there was another little girl, we'll save these for the rest, who started smoking and drinking after waking
How
up
old
from
was
a
she?
coma. 3 years old. Yeah, and it showed proof that she went around looking for cigarettes and everything. It's crazy.
You've got to be
Crazy.
kidding.
You've got to be
I'm
kidding.
not. But anyway, that's a wrap. We thank you so much for coming. It's a good topic for people to be aware of. If you're living in an older home or you're buying a
Right.
historical home, you've got to get it tested for lead paint.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just go to the state website. Mark, thank you so much.
You're
for
very
coming.
welcome.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
a pleasure
Thank
to be
you.
here.
And you answered all the questions just
Yeah,
fine.
Oh,
we answered
okay,
all
good.
of them. We had a whole bunch of them for you.
So anyway, thank you all for watching the show. And remember, if you or anyone you know has an older home and there are children under age 6 living there, and you think there may be a possibility, just please take a look at the website. And if you need to find out what the website address is, again, just get in touch with Roberta and me at info@thelawyourmoneyandyou.com. Thank you again for watching, and please let us hear from you about your ideas and your feedback, because remember, this is your show, The Law, Your Money,
And
you.